Hello and welcome. Today's guest is Nate Ghoens, founder of Abide Capital Group. Hailing from Boone, North Carolina, Nate's path led him from college soccer to an eventual career in the Navy, where he still serves on active duty. He's now leveraging his disciplined approach and strategic mindset that he's gained from his military service to thrive as an investor in the dynamic world of real estate. He's grown his portfolio to almost 200 doors in his first year as an investor. When he's not working, Nate finds balance in his roles as a loving husband to his wife and a devoted father to their two daughters. Join us as we delve into Nate's journey, uncovering insights and lessons learned along the way. Nate, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here. That was a great intro. I felt like I could walk into an arena. That was awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, with the hype music playing in the background.
Yeah. I just got to pick my song.
It's only a matter of time, man. I'm confident that is going to happen. You're going to be taking the stage soon. Um, why don't you start out by briefly just telling us a little bit about how did you get into real estate and why?
Okay, yeah, sure. So for me, it all started, active duty Navy, right? But for me, it started a couple of years ago. Just kind of seeing my friends, seeing successful people in the military, active duty passive income, right? And just seeing success stories and realizing there's people that are active duty military that can build and grow wealth through real estate investing. And so kind of had my eye on it with Ramsey. He and I are close friends and serve in the same community. So I'd kind of been seeing what he was doing. And I got into essentially entrepreneurship, right? And we opened up a specialty coffee business a couple of years ago from the ground up. Didn't know anything about coffee, but just immersed myself in the coffee world, which is a deep rabbit hole, by the way. And I'm a huge coffee snob, self-proclaimed. So looking at the entrepreneurship side of creating a business. And then really what was the driving factor for me is, I've been in the stock market for a long time. I had a brokerage account, probably going on about 8 years now. And I realized that when I was looking at that account, I felt like the only time that it was increasing significantly was when I was injecting my own capital, right?
Mhm.
And I quickly realized that my financial goals were not lining up with my current financial position, that I wasn't going to be able to achieve the freedom that I wanted with my family continuing down the path that I was on. And so that's kind of where everything started for me of hey, I really need to either one, understand the stock market better and what I needed to do to really build and grow wealth, or I could have a tangible asset, something that's not intrinsic, and start investing into real estate and dive down that rabbit hole. So about a year, actually a little over a year ago now, started Middle Class to Millionaire and just really educating myself on real estate investing, what it was, how to do it, so I could make the best decision for myself and my family in regards to our financial future.
Awesome. Now, I know you mentioned middle class to millionaire, and I know what that is, but for those who are listening who may not be familiar, do you mind giving just a couple minutes of what it is and what you found to be valuable about being a part of that community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I consider them, part of my mentor group. So Ramsey Blankenship, Joey Bickham, and Brandon Magarowski. So they really were the catalyst to get me into syndicating. So they have an educational program that
Mhm.
basically walks you through the foundations of a syndication, right? It helps you understand what a syndication is, how to speak the language to brokers, really kind of almost in a 1,000-foot view, taking a syndication full cycle. And it's just that stepping stone to further education. So that's what Middle Class to Millionaire was for me. That was really what I needed to give me an understanding of what I potentially was about to get in again, so I could make a really solid decision. And so that was about, I think it was around 2 months, the course itself. And then that rolled into the mastermind group right after, where we have like-minded individuals that are brokers, capital raisers, very successful people within the industry that come together collectively to start, brainstorming, helping each other with problem solving, different things like that. So that really was kind of the driving factor. I really saw how much they care to help, right? And if you can get around the right people, that can really help you be successful, and highly recommended, right? To get around people that just have the energy that you want to have.
Yeah, I think that's such an important factor in terms of finding your people, right? I mean, there's people doing real estate everywhere. There's so many different groups. And I think when you can find a group who has alignment in goals and values and wants to see everybody succeed, it really makes a difference in terms of like how, sort of that rising tide can lift all boats, right? Like how we can
Mm,
all grow and accelerate in our journey together by helping each other out and doing it together instead of being out there on your own, just trying to figure it out.
absolutely, because it is a beast. I mean,
Yeah.
syndication is like there's a lot that goes on. I know that a lot of folks are like, hey, it's not rocket science, which it's not, but it's just a lot of work. So that the networking piece, I think, too, like you were just alluding to, has been huge for me. I've met so many just unique individuals that offer value to you. And I'm learning how to offer value to them as well, right? I don't just want to be a sponge and not offer anything in return, but the networking has just been incredible.
Yeah, that's a really great point too about adding value. I think it can be challenging for us, right, when we're new at something and we're just starting out and we feel like we're that sponge that's just like soaking it all up, right? And it's like, oh, I need to learn this and I need to learn that. And how do I do this and how do I do that? But when you can approach it from that perspective of like still seeking to add value in your own way, whatever that looks like as you're growing and learning and going through the process.
Absolutely. And
Um,
that's kind of a hard thing to figure out too, because I
mhm,
will say this, at the very beginning, I was a sponge, and that's what the course was for, right? I did want to ask questions, but a lot of it, there's a lot of information out there that you can look up. And like we were talking about before the show, that I've been going through Hunter Thompson's course, and he
mhm.
talks about when you approach people that can offer a lot of value to you. You don't say, hey, let me pick your brain. It's, hey, I've already done this, right? I've already read your book, or I've already researched this. Can you expound more? So it shows that you have intentionality behind what you're doing and you truly care about what you're doing. So I've been trying to take that on board as well. But it's hard. You're right, in the very beginning, to be able to do that. But when you can, it's important that you do it.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's where kind of that differentiator is, right? Between like your initial education versus when you get to that networking phase, right? Like when you're
Sure.
initially in the education phase, like that's the intent. You're there to learn. But once you're in that point where you're like networking and you're looking for potential partners and, kind of going through that whole process, it's noticeable and makes such a big difference when you come from that place of like, how can we work together? How can I help you so that we can all win, as opposed to like, what can you do for me? It
Absolutely.
really it makes a difference. And, you can kind of sniff that out when people are coming from a place of just looking to take and not necessarily looking to give.
100%.
Yeah. You mentioned freedom, and I'd love to know what, like, for you personally, like, what is your definition of freedom for you and your family? What does that look like?
Really, I mean, everybody says time, right? And that really is it. And I think for being active duty military and you being retired, right? We have a little bit of a taste of what how valuable time is, whether it was going through deployments or training, right? And realizing like how precious it is, and that you can't get that time back, right? When I first got married to my wife, just doing the job that I do in our operational tempo at the time, the first 6 years that we were married, I was gone over 3 years of our marriage, and that's time I can't ever get back. Right now, I have two kids and going through deployments, and so that freedom for me looks like being able to be home with my kids. Right now
Mm,
that I'm home a lot because I'm on shore duty, but my daughter's like, hey, can you not leave anymore? And so that's always something that tugs at my heartstrings. And I not that I want to retire. I want to retire from the Navy in 20 years, which is 3 years from now. But I want to have the freedom to go, right? I want to be able to go on vacation, and I can, I like capital raising is my niche. So I do that at a distance? Can I do that in different parts of the country or the world? And absolutely. And so that's kind of what freedom looks like for me, not necessarily being done working, but being able to prioritize the time that I have, having more of that, right? And I struggle with that now too, because I can get so focused on the end state, right, of the goal of financial freedom that gives me my time freedom, that I can lose sight of what I'm doing it for, right? And I'll have moments and pockets where I can be really attentive to my girls, and I'll forego that because my mind's so caught up in the end state that I don't even value the time that I have in the moment of what I'm trying to work for, if that makes sense, right?
It,
And so
it makes a
I
lot of sense. I think that's very, very relatable. I would love to hear what you do to try to, combat that natural sort of draw sometimes where, especially if we're doing something that we're enjoying, right? Like
Mhm.
how do you find that balance between staying present in the moment with your family and working on work and real estate and,
Sure.
entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, I stink at it, and my wife is very good at telling me when I'm a little too deep. And we've been married to almost 14 years now, but it's hard because of my personality. I'm very driven. I'm a very A-type personality. Have a very A-type personality, and I'm a perfectionist by nature. And so my mind is just constantly racing about the next step. What can I do to better myself? How do I separate myself from the rest of the pack? And so really it takes putting my phone away, and it does take my wife to be like, hey, you're checked out. And I have to kind of readjust, my mind. But I think one of the things that I try to keep in mind is like, I know it's kind of cliche that you're not guaranteed tomorrow, but I look back, I don't want my girls to be like, hey, dad, you were on your phone the whole time. And I hear these stories of kids that draw pictures of their parents, and they'll have one of their parents with a phone in front of them. And that's reality.
Yeah.
That's the hard truth. And I don't want that to be me. And as you know, as capital raising, you spend a lot of time on the phone. And so it's really coming home. When I come home from work, I take about 20 minutes, 30 minutes with my girls, run around, play with them, kind of just unwind for a minute, put my phone away. And then after 6 p.m., like, and that's a new rule for me, is that is family time. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but I got to prioritize that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, what works for one may not work for all, right? But I think the fact that you've taken that time to kind of build those boundaries into your schedule for the day and, mark that time like being with my family is important and I'm going to set aside this time. This is family time and there's nothing else that's going to trump that. And you
Mm.
work your work around it. And I think that's part of what has been a big draw for me as well. Getting into real estate after retirement has been like, I really enjoy working actually. Like I can't imagine just like sitting around and doing nothing.
Sure.
Um, but I like that it gives me the opportunity to work my work around the
Mm.
family and have that flexibility in the timing. And ideally eventually, right, like maybe there will be less work and more fun, but at least in the meantime, it provides that flexibility to be able to do both.
Absolutely.
Um, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how did you go from 0 doors to almost 200 doors in your first year? Like, what was your approach to that? And, how have you accomplished that so far?
Mhm. So once I finished the middle class to millionaires course and then moved into the mastermind group, one of my mentors had mentioned, because I had some capital that I wanted to inject into a
Mhm.
deal. I knew I didn't quite have the skill set yet to really provide value as a general partner. And so still kind of learning through that process, right? And so my mentor basically was like, hey, I've got a really solid deal. Here's a good way to get your foot in the door and start building credibility, right? Even when
Mhm.
you're reaching out to brokers, because I know this to be true. When you reach out to a broker and you have, because I send them a little bio when I reach out to a broker. And when I first started doing that, I didn't have any doors under my belt, right? And it is on a limited partner side as an
Mhm.
LP. But he was basically like, hey, if you're, and at this time, I didn't know I wanted to be a capital raiser. I still was trying to figure out where I fit in, right? But basically, he was like, if you're going to ask people to invest into your deals, but you've never invested into one yourself,
Mhm.
one, how do you know how it works, and how can you really sit there and ask people to inject capital, money that they've, through sweat, blood, and tears have earned, and then ask them to invest if you haven't done it yourself. And that really resonated with me. And I'm like, man, that is true, because that was one of the first questions I asked him. I was like, hey, are you investing in this deal? Now, granted, I knew that he was an LP on multiple deals, but that just kind of gave me a baseline, because what it all boils down to for me is, I have to conduct myself with unimpeachable integrity and morals. And I don't want to present something that I'm not, but that gives me the ability to say, hey, I've done it. I've put X amount of dollars into 189 units. And that gives them comfort to know like, hey, he's not just coming in and asking me for cash. He's done it himself. So that's kind of how I got into that, was to, give me some credibility. And so now I'm currently working through a GP that we're hopefully closing out here in the next month or two. So that'll add to my GP side, right? And so it's just kind of a stacking game at this point. So that was, again, the basis for me was just, hey, how do I get credibility, and how do I really justify being able to talk to people to raise money if I haven't invested myself?
Awesome. We'll talk a little bit more here in a minute about kind of your path to discovering like what your role was going to be. But before we do that, I'd love to have you expound a little further on like, how do you feel like now that you are an LP in those deals, like how does that prepare you to be a better general partner in terms of like having a true understanding of like taking care of other people's money?
Yeah, so if we just look at the system side of it, right now, I know the processes that I had to go through, creating accounts and going through PPMs and kind of the things that I got stuck on when I was going through those, and just how that process works. Because that's a lot of questions when somebody does finally say, hey, I want to invest with you. A lot of the question is like, well, what do I do now? And that's the backside systems of like, hey, this is what you got to do, so that helped tremendously. And so on the LP side, it really, again, it helps me speak to like uncertainties that they may have, and be like, hey, Adam, I was there with you, but here's how I can mitigate those. This is how I mitigated the risks, right? Know the GP team, know, like, and trust them. Look at the underwriting. Is it conservative? So, those were things that I did as an LP. So I literally just put myself in their place, and that, and kind of try to get ahead of the questions that I think they're going to ask. And that helps too when I'm pitching, on an investor pitch deck, when I'm talking to investors, and I already kind of know what they're thinking. And when I can answer those questions before they ask them, it just gives a little more credibility, right? And so it's really, it encompasses a whole lot to be able to get that first deal under your belt, and then have the confidence to go and ask people for, capital.
Yeah. And not just the confidence, but actually have that experience to be able to walk them through the process really does make a big difference.
Yep.
Okay. So now let's talk about how I'd love to hear just sort of your journey from, okay, I want to invest in real estate, and sort of like, how did you work your way through the different roles until you figured out that you want to be a capital raiser? What did that look like for you?
So so you know how it is, like going on deployments and stuff, or like, for me, I'm not on a ship, but I would go to an actual base, right? And when you get to a base and you're doing a turnover with a team, it's like all of these things just coming in at you 100 miles an hour. And you're like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to figure out what I got to do here? Where the chow hall is, where the gym is, like where my operational side is. And so I call it, you don't eat a pie. Some people eat a pie to the face, right? But you eat a pie one slice at a time, right? And so when I first started, it was just like that. It was overwhelming. There were so many different skill sets that needed to be accomplished within a general partnership team, that I didn't really know what I could do or what I would like to do. And so it wasn't until last week that I figured it out. And that's been well over a year. But I like relationships. I knew I like networking, and really creating truthful and organic relationships, right? Like I really am not trying to sell anybody on anything. I want to bring them along in my journey, and I want to grow wealth together, because without them, I can't do it, right? I can't do it on my own. And so it really just kind of took some time of underwriting for a while, and realizing like I like it, but I'm not quick at it yet. It just didn't feel right. And so, I like broker relationships, but that was also taking a lot of time, much like capital raising does. But realizing that what holds most people back, or general partnerships back, from being able to secure a deal is capital. There's plenty of experience out there, but if you can be really good at raising capital, maybe that would be my niche. And so I've been working towards that, just trying to be better at raising capital, because it was uncomfortable at first. I did feel like a salesman until I realized, like, I'm not offering a product to someone in exchange for their money. I'm offering them an investment opportunity in exchange for their money to give them more money, And so when I could shift that and stop worrying also about like what I care a lot about what people think, unfortunately. It can be a good or a bad thing. So I don't like people to say no to me when I'm asking them, hey, would you be interested in an investment opportunity if one ever comes? And so once I finally have gotten over that hurdle of like, hey, that's okay. It might not be for everybody, and somebody saying no to you is okay. That's kind of what transformed me last week to realize like, hey, capital raising is my thing. Like that is what I'm going to be good at. It's okay. It took me a year to figure that out, and I went through some repetitions on other things. But I think if you have a passion for something and you know what you're good at and you can excel, that's the time to move in that direction. And again, my biggest thing is it's okay to not know that at the beginning and to figure it out. It might take you a couple deals. And that's one thing right now for me, my line of work, one of our mottos is initial success or total failure. And so I've always operated under this idea that mistakes weren't okay. And sometimes they're not, right? So if you didn't do your due diligence in something, then that mistake isn't okay if you didn't do the right work to avoid that, right? Sometimes mistakes happen, and that's just life. But now I've gotten to the point to where it's like, hey, I'm not going to get it right every single time. And that's okay as long as it's not dealing with somebody's money. Like maybe I sent out a text message and I'm trying to do, a new pitch to someone and that didn't work. I got to be okay with that because I don't know what I don't know yet. And I think when you get to the point to where you're too scared to do something because you don't want to make a mistake, now you're kind of functioning in a capacity of inaction, and you're not really doing anything. So I know that was a really long answer to what you asked, but capital raising, that's my thing, that's my niche, that's where I'm going, and I want to crush it.
I love it. I think you're going to be really good at it. To just let you know my own personal opinion.
Thank
I could tell even, when we met a few months ago, and I remember we talked about the 500K challenge, and initially you were like, "Nah, man." I was like, "Just give it a try." It's
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
think you'll find that it will help you along your path.
Oh man. And for your
How
listeners
was
out
that
there,
for you?
uh, it was hard. And for everybody out there, so Tracy, she's the one that really encouraged me to do my Facebook Lives for the month of December. And it was hard. I was getting more nervous to do the Facebook Lives than I am like briefing admirals and generals, and but the one thing about it that got me out of my comfort zone into getting in front of people on social media, and that's always been something that I still don't know where I stand with the social media, because I feel like now everything just, even if somebody's really not trying to sell you something, it feels like it, because that's just kind of what Facebook is. And so I'm trying to shift that paradigm. But I didn't know how that was going to turn out for me, and I was getting a ton of views. I'm talking like my first video got like almost 400 views, and I'm like, amazing. And then I was like, nobody's watching this video for like 2 minutes. I doubt it. And so then I looked at Facebook, how they quantify views, right? It's like a 3 second
Yeah.
or qualified views. It's like a 3 second view. But, and I think most people probably thought I got hacked because I don't ever do social media. They're like, let's see who did this to Nate, like how funny is this video going to be? But anyway, so it taught me to step out of my comfort zone without a doubt. It also taught me that if I'm going to go in front of people, I better know what I'm talking about, right? And it brushed up on my foundations, because there were things that I learned throughout the process, about like just little things that I would always do just a little prep session before, because it's important to me, just like it should be for everybody. If you're going to put out information, it needs to be right. And if it's not, it's okay. You can go back and, address it. But that was really big for me, was just stepping out of my comfort zone into social media. Like I said, good, bad, or indifferent, the jury's still out on that. And I'm trying to look at different ways to break the paradigm and to be different. And that might be not doing it on social media and continuing to do what I'm doing through, direct text messaging, calling people. And I mean, I got a $25,000 investment from going and having coffee with a guy, and so those are little things that I want to be different with. But this social media just kind of made me, like I said, get out in front of people, and then it helped me make a decision on, do I really want to do that or not? So
Awesome. You mentioned something a minute ago. You said you sort of asked the question of like, what's holding most teams back? Like, what's that thing that like keeps people from being able to be successful? And then like, how can I help them solve that problem?
Mhm.
I think that's such a brilliant way to look at it in terms of like knowing who you are, knowing what your skills are, knowing what you enjoy, and then looking, sort of reverse engineering back into like, what are the problems that exist that are related to that? And like, where can I come in and come alongside somebody and help them with that? And
Mhm.
I think that's definitely something that I've been working on as well this year. Um, I just read a book that talks about like finding your zone of genius. And,
Mhm.
I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that is. I look back at what the jobs are that I had in the military and what are the roles that I had that I really enjoyed the work and, kind of do almost like an energy audit. Like, what are the things that light you up, that get you excited, that you really enjoy and look forward to, and it doesn't feel like work? And how can you make that be the most of what you do on a daily
Mhm.
basis instead of all the other stuff that we find ourselves like filling our schedules with? So that's been a really interesting exercise over the last several weeks and months for me, is just sort of kind of continually reevaluating like what are those things that feel like it's my zone of genius, so that I could figure out what that is and keep,
Sure.
trying to do more of that and less of other things.
Sure.
Um,
And I think it takes a lot of self-evaluation, right? And I think a lot of folks are afraid to self-evaluate and
mhm.
identify your personal problems and to say it out loud and speak truth to yourself to make adjustments, right? And so I think a lot of that comes from just, hey, take a look at yourself and where you can improve. And so I think self-evaluation is a powerful tool.
Definitely. It's a lot of inner work. It's a lot of mindset stuff. It's a lot of like
Mhm.
actually stopping to think about that stuff. And I feel like for such a long time, I was just this like go, 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 go person. Like I never really stopped to like take stock of like, what what am I doing? Is this what I want to be doing? I think the military does a great job of like not giving us a lot of choices, right? And so you don't
Yeah,
often
yeah,
have a lot of time or need to like really stop and think about it, because it's like, okay, your next job, you can do X, Y, or Z. Which one do you want? You have choice
yeah,
between these two duty stations. Which one
yeah.
do you want?
That's right.
Or, if you're lucky to have a choice at all, right? Sometimes it's not
Sure.
even that. And so it's really been an interesting time. You were asking me earlier, like, how's retirement? And, since I retired, like I've had more time than I ever had before to really do that, to take that
Mhm.
time to stop and think about like what am I doing? What do I enjoy? Like what's fun?
Sure.
What gets me excited, and how can I do more of that and work that into my day? And so it's been a really fun journey to kind of go along that path. And I feel like I had a very similar experience to what you did, where when I first got into real estate and was learning about syndications, I thought I was going to do asset management, because
Mm.
that's pretty much what I did in the military. Was a lot of project management type stuff. But then, like, a big part of the reason why I retired is I no longer wanted to be like the person that they called when something was wrong, right? Like I was happy to kind of step back and let somebody else take that. Then I thought I was going
Sure.
to do underwriting. And, it's like, I have a finance degree. I understand business and
Mhm.
numbers and all of that. But for much the same reason that you said, like, I can do the numbers, but I do not love the numbers. And I
Mhm.
don't like see them that quickly. I have to like really spend a lot of time digging in to truly understand it. And
Yeah.
ultimately, I found capital raising as well and was like, man, like this hits all the things that I love. I enjoy talking to people and connecting and building relationships and finding win-win solutions. And
Mhm.
so if I can come in and help people who are busy professionals who, you know, probably have money, but like don't have the time to really get into the real estate investing game, and make sure that they know that there are ways to take advantage of real estate that don't involve you having to be a landlord. And I think
Yep.
for me, for a long time, that was something that I just didn't know. I didn't understand. What I saw modeled for me over and over and over again was either people buying a house, living in it for a few years, and then selling it and making a bunch of money when they move duty stations,
Yep.
or people keeping those properties and becoming a landlord and then moving to another duty station and doing it again, moving to another,
Yeah.
duty station, doing it again, rinse and repeat. But then they're like a full-time landlord of all these properties and, very busy and always dealing with, issues. And so neither one of those, I just always felt like my timing was off, I guess. And so those were pretty much what I saw modeled as like how to make money in real estate. And so it just always kind of got othered like, oh, that's not for me because I'm not in the right place at the right time to take advantage of those opportunities. And
Sure.
knowing what I know now, and I look back and I'm like, man, if 5 or 10 years ago I had known that I could just partner with somebody else and let them do all of that and still let my
Yeah.
money make more money, like I would have liked to know that. And
Sure.
so, now I have the opportunity to share that information. And if that helps somebody, then awesome. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't, then I just keep doing what I'm doing and, it's nothing lost to me. So I
Sure.
think it's
And
it's a, it's a great opportunity to be able to share that information and, try to help the next person not be stuck in the same place that I was.
yeah, and that's a great point that like, that's exactly what I thought real estate was single family
Mhm.
stuff. I never dreamed back in, 2016, 2015 that, heck, even a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
I didn't know that I could invest into larger real estate assets. That never was explained to me. I didn't even think about researching. I just assumed, hey, that's all the really wealthy people that do that. That's not
Hmm.
me. And so I think you just kind of gave me a tool. Like that's a really good way to look at it too when you're capital raising. Like again, you're presenting an opportunity where the majority of the people that I've been raising capital from now, they are unaware of syndications,
Hmm.
right? So one of
Yeah.
my big pushes is to educate, because at the end of the day, I want a quality relationship with my investor. Like I want like and the only way that I can get that, and for them to make a decision that allows them to sleep at night and that allows me to sleep at night, is to give them as much information I can and then help them through understanding the process so they can arrive at a decision that meets their financial goal, not mine, right? But their
Absolutely.
financial goal. And so it's a great point, and the education piece, like you got to have that to have a sophisticated investor. So, and that's really what I love about this is that, and I actually was on a phone call with a guy the other day, and I got a call about 2 years ago from a guy that I was deployed with in Afghanistan. And he was like, hey man, and this is like 12 years down the road. He's like, what you taught me saved my life. And I just
Mhm.
wanted you to know that I appreciate that, and it like, and that meant the world to me. And that's kind of the same concept, because this same gentleman was like, hey, what are your goals for capital raising? And I'm like, well, I don't really think I have a number. I have a mindset that I want my investors to call me up and be like, Nate, that was phenomenal. You crushed it. I've grown my portfolio this much, or hey, I've been able to put my kids through college and now I'm able to retire early. I'm looking for that effect 5, 6 years down the road that literally and truly impacted someone's life, right? And so that's what gets me going, and I want to be different too. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Of like, I just read a book called Unreasonable Hospitality, and it's
Mm.
about
Okay.
how number one restaurant in the world, it was in New York, how they achieved that. And so it talks about, front of the house, back of the house. If you ever done restaurant work, that, some of these really nice restaurants, the food is it, right? And they were like, no, we can't ever be number one if we don't mesh the back of the house and the front of the house, and hospitality, taking
Hmm.
care of our customers, taking care of our investors. And so when it comes to like, curating the experience, I like the idea of when I have investors and we close out a deal, I want to send them something unique, right? I got a guy
Hmm.
that really likes cigars, and so maybe I send him a humidifier that has, our emblem in the property that's that we closed on. But just doing something unique and different per person, because I've spent enough time with them to know what they like, right?
Yeah.
And that's important. I don't look at them just as, money. I want to know about them. I want to know what's going on in their personal life, and I want to truly be invested with them as well. So, kind of curious your thoughts on that, of like curating, I mean, breaking the paradigm of what capital raising is right now.
Yeah, I think that's so good and like so refreshing to hear. One of my mentors, when, early on when we talked about like how to set goals as a capital raiser, one of the best pieces of advice that I got from him that I think really has, affected my mindset about the way that I raise capital is I don't have a goal number either. Like my goal is this year I want to help 20 families.
Mm,
Next year I want to help 50 families. Like if I'm going to measure something, it's going to be the number of people that I'm able to help, learn about it, know that
Yep.
it's an option. Like that might not mean that that many people invest with me, but if I'm able to have, a number of investor calls where I can help people know that this is an option for them, I mean, probably at least half of the calls that I have, people are like, whoa, like, what's the minimum investment?
Yeah.
And then, they're like, yeah, I'm not ready for that. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, like, let's talk about what are your financial goals? Like,
Yep.
what are you trying to do? Where are you at? And how can we put a plan together so that you can start working towards that? And maybe,
Mhm.
in a few years, maybe you will get to the point where syndication makes sense for you. Maybe you won't. Maybe you don't ever want to do that kind of investment. Like, that's okay. And I
Yep.
think, like you said something about, your focus just being on educating, letting people know what their options are, helping them come up with a plan. And then the other piece for me is like, maybe they're not a good fit for the
Mhm.
types of investments that I'm doing. But what information do I have? What connections do I have? Who do I know that might be
Mhm.
a good fit for them? Like a lot of people, syndication's like a 5 to 7 year time horizon a lot of
Yeah.
times. And some people that's a bit too long and they can't have their money tied up for that long. Maybe that, I can partner them with somebody I know who does flipping and they can
Yep.
do a shorter term. And so I think when you approach it from that perspective of like, what are their needs? What are their problems? How
Mhm.
can I help them? Like, you're
Yep.
never going to go wrong. And I think that's absolutely the right perspective to have if you're going to get into capital raising, because
Yep.
you're coming from the right place that you
Mhm.
you genuinely want to help people, you want to help them succeed, and you want to help them accomplish their financial goals. And it's not about like how many people can I get to invest in this deal that I'm raising for right now today. And
Yep.
that really
Absolutely.
makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And and I get, and you probably experienced it too when you're in the military, but I get a lot of young guys, especially when they hear that I'm into real estate or like, because they'll just be like, hey, should I sell my single family home? And so just anything real estate
Mm-hmm.
at work, I'm the real estate guy. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and when I know a little bit about what they're trying to do, there's so many products out there that are, even Fannie Freddie offering things similar to a VA loan in the sense of, hey, they'll loan you X amount of dollars with, zero to no money down, close to, for multifamily, apartment complex,
Mm-hmm.
4 or 6, right? You just have to live in it. And so many people don't know these different, like you said, these other ways to build wealth or to get into real estate. And so when I know that somebody's not, well, one, I'm not pitching to young guys in my command either, but when I see what they want, I still want to add value
Yeah.
again, because years down the road, maybe they get into it and they're like, man, I remember that senior chief. Like he helped me out tremendously. Look at where I'm at now, and get a phone call. Hey, do you remember that time in your office? Like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? So there's all sorts of ways to add value. And the more you educate yourself, the better off you can
Yeah.
help people, because you can put them down different avenues. So
Absolutely. 100%. So you mentioned, engaging with folks at work and, trying to help people there. I'm curious to know, like, what do you think having a military background has done for you to set you up to be successful in real estate?
specifically, at least within my community, is critical thinking, right?
Hmm.
Being able to work under massive amounts of stress. My job right now, well, it's a lot different than it used to be, just because I'm kind of project managing now. But people's lives were in my hand. And so now people's lives are in my hand. It's no different. It's
Yeah.
not, people aren't shooting bullets at my investors, but that's still their money, right? And so I think that just the like how I've been taught to execute a task under pressure, because there's a lot of pressure in, whether it's a due diligence period or trying to raise capital before before the loan closes out, to make sure that you can actually close out the deal. There's a ton of pressure. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just the critical thinking and being able to function under pressure, and being able to execute a task and do it well. And it's also, very A-type personality, within my community. It also, I don't like anybody to be better than me, and I mean that in the best way. So I also drive harder, because I've been around very high functioning individuals that always push the envelope, and it's caused me to push the envelope, not just in my military career, but in my real estate career. So I think there's a lot of things that it's affected. And two, I'm getting close to retirement. One of the things I'm going to miss are high driven individuals that are going to do what they say they're going to do and are very capable of functioning under that same stress. And so when I look at elite operators, I see that same mentality of what I'm surrounded with every day, of people that want to set the bar, that want to work hard, that have a passion, that are trustworthy, right? That are going to do what they say they're going to do, and they're going to execute even when their back's against the wall. And that's what I was craving as well, as like, how do I fill that void? And it was syndications. When I look at some of these folks, my mentors that are functioning at a very high level, it was awesome.
Yeah, I definitely think there are a lot of parallels between the military background and the syndication communities that I'm in as well. And some of that is probably because a lot of those people come from the military, and so they have that same sort of mindset and background and drive. And so it definitely has been a comfortable transition, I think, going from a military community to the real estate syndication community, at least the folks that we've been surrounded by. So I think that's made a nice transition as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about earlier, you mentioned something about that one of your skills is like helping people get unstuck. And so I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, and maybe even sharing in your own journey, kind of going through the process of finding your way in syndication. Like, how do you keep taking action even if you don't know what you're doing or what's next?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, I think because I experienced it so many times in my career of like having to learn something that was extremely important, right? Or that I was overwhelmed. I think just realizing, like, if you feel overwhelmed like I did when I first started all of this, that's okay. It's natural. I think that as a society, we can put so much on, like, oh well, if it's overwhelming you, it's not for you, or like if it's
Mm,
stressing you, just be done with it, or it didn't work this one time, so I'm not, it must not be for me, right? And so I think the biggest part is just realizing, like, hey, it's gonna be hard.
mm,
There's days where I'm just like, oh, I do not want to do this. I don't want to do a call at 9:45 at night, but I do it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I need to push this off and prioritize my family or whatever it may be. But I think just knowing, like, hey, it, if it's going to last and what you're creating is going to last, it's going to take work and it's going to
mhm,
be hard and you're going to have setbacks. But as long as you're taking two steps forward after your one step back, then you're always progressing. And so that's kind of what it was for me. I had to find a balance of being realistic of how much work I could do, and setting those boundaries and saying, okay, I did my 2 hours, now I need to move on to something else. And another big thing for me is perspective shift. I focus so much on what I haven't accomplished versus taking victory in the things that I have. And that's just me. That's how my mind works. So what I mean by that is I have, like, it gets to the point where my wife's like, hey, write down what you accomplished today and look at what you did, because your list of what you haven't done is always going to be longer, right? Most of the time. But she's like, look at what you've done today. Like, you have got to snap out of it, because again, I lose those victories because I'm so caught up, and I got to get this email campaign set up. I got to set up this journey. I got to get this educational email out. And back to the Facebook thing, one of the reasons why I did the Facebook Live is because when I would do educational content videos, to shoot a 3-minute video, it'd take me an hour, because I'd stop it, I'd delete it, I stop it, I delete it. And Facebook Live was like, this is it. It's a full send, right? So that would probably be the biggest thing that got me through, is knowing that it's going to be hard, enjoying your victories, and enjoy the process, right? Like, these folks that are crushing syndications like you and Wild Oak Capital, they didn't get there overnight. It took years to do this. And so I think if you have this idea that it's a get rich quick scheme, then maybe it isn't for you. But it's going to be hard, it's going to take work, but you're going to get so much out of it with the networking and just creating good habits and being around people that just their energy just brings you along, and you can't help but like want to be a part of that, you know? So I think I kind of answered your question there a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
you hit on like so many good things there. One of the last things you just said was like it's not a get rich quick. And I
mhm,
think that's so important. You know, this deserves like the foot stomp, right? Like pay attention here. Like this is not a get rich quick scheme. Like if you're looking to get rich quick, like syndications and honestly most real estate endeavors, it's not it. Like it takes work, it takes time, it takes consistent
mhm,
effort over and over and over and over again. But what one of my mentors always says, and I love the phrase, it's like, it's not a get rich quick, but it is a build wealth for sure. And
mhm,
so I think on the days where it gets difficult, it's a good reminder of like, why am I doing this? And, you know, what is the point of this? And it's because I want to build wealth for our family. I want to build a legacy so that my kids can have a different experience than I did growing up. I want
yep,
to be able to travel with them and show them the world and just, you know, build their cultural exposure as kids so that they have a better appreciation for what they have, right?
mm,
And so when I start to get in those days where it's like, man, like what am I doing? It's like, oh,
yeah,
I remember, right? Like this is not this is not a short game.
yeah,
And you mentioned something about you didn't specifically say consistency, but what I heard you say
mhm,
was something along the lines of like, I put in my 2 hours. And I
mhm,
think that that is really, really key, especially, you know, for somebody like you, like you're still working a full-time, you know, not just W-2, like military career
mhm,
responsibility. You've got your family. Like it's not like you don't have anything else going on, but you identified a specific piece of time that you are going to commit to do this thing. And if it's 2 hours a day or if it's 20 minutes a day or whatever it is, you do that thing. You make your
yep,
phone calls, you do your underwriting, like whatever it is that you're supposed to do during that time, you do it. And even if that's all that you can do, if you do that consistently day in, day out, the needle will move.
yep,
You know, I think I was reading something the other day that was, I think it's like 18 minutes a day is like 100 hours over the course of
mhm,
a year. Like that's a
sure,
lot of time.
yep,
So it's easy for us, I think, if we don't have a big chunk of time to be like, oh, you know, it's not going to be worth it. But
yeah,
even 5, 10, 15 minutes of effort consistently can really make a big difference over time.
yep, totally agree.
The other thing that you mentioned about like celebrating your wins. And I just read the book, The Gap and the Gain. I don't know if
Mm,
you've heard of it or
yep,
read it by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I
okay,
think it is an excellent book. Based on your self-description, I think you and I are probably very similar. And it's been a really good book for me in terms of like I have that same mentality of like always looking forward like right like what's the next thing, like what are all the things that I'm supposed to be getting done, and I
yeah,
forget to look back and see how far I've come
mhm,
and all that I have accomplished. And so my biggest takeaway from the book that I just recently implemented in the last couple of weeks is basically 3 wins at the end of every
mhm,
day. And
yep,
so the last thing that I do before I go to bed is to sit down and think about what are 3 wins from the day, and
yeah,
then that is like the last thought before I go to sleep. So I'm going to sleep thinking about something positive,
yeah,
thinking about, you know, what I accomplished. And it really does make a difference in terms of like how I wake up and approach the next day and not
sure,
just be thinking about all the things that I didn't get done, but like
yeah,
I got some stuff done. And now today
yeah.
I'm going to get some more stuff done. And every day I'm going to
That's
get some stuff done and just
yeah,
focus on
that's
those. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
yeah, that's a great point because that is not what I do. I'm literally laying in bed going, "What do I got to do tomorrow?"
I mean, that's
And
what I used to do. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's great because it probably helps you sleep better and everything.
Hmm.
Like rest your mind. Yeah, great point.
Yeah, it talks in the book about some of the like the unconscious stuff that happens while we're sleeping. And so
Yeah,
the more that you can sort of like wrap the day up in a place of peace and like focusing on positive things will likely lead to a much better night of sleep and a much better start to the next
Yeah.
day than go. I mean, I used to be the person that would like lay awake in bed thinking about all these things, and then I have to get my notebook and like write them down because what if I forgot? I don't think about it in the
Yeah.
morning. I try not to do that anymore. Sometimes I still wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and then I can't go back to sleep because my brain just starts racing about stuff. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
definitely is a practice that is, I think, moving me in the right direction.
Sure, sure. That's fine that you say it because last night I was literally thinking about who I needed to add to my capital raise list. And I was like, if I had a book, I could write this down. Man, wrong idea. I did want to kind of piggyback though on the consistency piece that we talked about.
Hmm.
And I'm sure people have heard this before, but I think it's a great view is that the difference between motivation and discipline, right? And you can be super like I get motivated leaving a conference, right? Or like when we do our mastermind groups and we're pushing really hard, but the motivation's gonna wane at some point. It's gonna go away. And then you're left with like, are you disciplined? And I hit those, like I literally just, for people that may be struggling, like it wasn't until the beginning of like towards the end of last week that I started getting up at the crack of dawn again to get my 2 hours of studying in for real estate, right? Or to learn how to capital raise better. I went for like a month straight because I was just so worn out. And don't forget to take care of yourself, take care of your body. Like if you do need to get some rest and you need to just turn it off for a little bit, that's okay. And then pick it back up. And so, I made a commitment like, hey, from now on, you're back up at 5 a.m. or 5:30, and you're going to get your hour and a half, in and get 30 minutes in at the end of the day, whatever it may be. But motivation goes away, and then you got discipline. And I think when you have discipline, that's what starts to set people apart.
Yeah, 100%. Discipline makes all the difference. And I think it is very helpful to get those like doses of motivation and kind
Mhm.
of renew that spirit of excitement. But then like you got to go back and do the work. And so
Yep.
you can't just ride on, the motivation is going to wane. And that's when it's
Yep.
like, okay, like I got to be
Yep.
consistent. I got to show up. I got to do the work. And I got to keep doing it until I can get to my next dose of motivation to kind of like
Yeah.
renew my energy and keep it going. But
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely makes a big difference. It's sort of like the commitment to yourself, right? Like that's where the discipline comes in is like you commit to yourself that you're going to do something, and are you actually going to show up for yourself and do it
Yeah.
when the cheering section isn't there anymore, like, yeah, let's
Yeah.
go. But like, are you going to get up and do it for you? And
Yeah.
because you have these clear goals that you've set out for your family and for your future, like is that enough for you to get up and show up every day and do what you're supposed to do?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we're wrapping things up here, but I like to end things with, like what advice would you give to somebody maybe who's out there, maybe they're also still on active duty. I know for me, I always thought that I had to wait until I retired because I
Mhm.
I don't know, I just didn't think I could do more than one thing at a time. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
what advice would you give to the person who's listening who's like, "Oh, I've thought about real estate before, but I'm not really sure like how do I actually get started? Like what's the first step? Like what advice would you give for them in terms of like what can they do to take action today to start moving towards that goal?"
Yeah, I mean, really, like with the middle class to millionaire, right? People that that are in the real estate sector, right? Just reaching out to them and starting to ask questions. My big thing is education, though.
Mm,
Like you can't make an informed decision if you're not informed, right? So there's so much information out there on Google, right? To just go out and Google what a syndication is, or hey, how do you make money in real estate, and start looking at that because you have to look into that stuff yourself, right? People are only going to give you what they have and what they know, but you can really kind of like structure that search specifically for what you're looking for and just asking the questions that I wish I would have educated myself more a few years back on just different investing vehicles in general. And that would be my biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask questions, look it up, educate yourself so you kind of have an idea of what you're talking about, and look for people that are doing the same thing that you want to do and talk to them. Surround yourself with them.
love it. That's excellent advice. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for sharing your insights and experience with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us your personal journey and some of the insights from your own personal experience and the struggles you've dealt with as you've kind of gone through the process and the lessons that you've learned. If our guests would like to continue to follow you, what would be the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so I've got abidecapitalgroup.com is my webpage, and then super easy Nate Ghoens on Facebook. And I kind of have a little bit, really not much of a presence on IG, but right now it's just Facebook and my website. So abidecapitalgroup.com and just Nate Ghoens on Facebook.
Awesome. Thanks again, Nate, for joining us and for sharing your wisdom with us today. And we will also provide links for those down in the show notes. And thank you to our wonderful listeners for tuning into this episode and being a part of this community. If you found value in this episode, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Until next time, remember that your path to financial freedom and the life of your dreams might be closer than you think. Take that first step and explore the possibilities. Stay tuned for more insightful episodes. And again, thanks for listening.